We are going to do a saddle stitching demo using one of our older books, Lacing and Stitching for Leathercraft. There's a lot of good info in here about lacing, stitching. We're going to dive right into page, I think it's 15, where it starts talking about saddle stitching. And we're actually going to be using our new TandyPro tools in lieu of the old tools that are referenced in here. We're going to update and modernize the saddle stitch and add some more like really interesting details that you can't see in the graphics in this book. So by the time this is over with, you should be able to put a nice zigzag line in using our angled pricking irons. Sort of a new meets old mashup from Tandy Leather. Hope you enjoy it. Got the groove. Start in the corner. You can actually see this flat side lines up with this groove, and then when you hammer it in, you know you've started your hole in the right direction, and your awl will finish it through the rest of the way. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a whack. All right, so that went in nice and straight, didn't come out the other side at all. And then we just move down the line. We leave one hole in the same place just to make sure the spacing is the same. Again, we align to make sure that the flat side of the tool lines up with our stitching groove so it's perfectly straight, and then we give it another nice whack, maybe two. Again, we're not going all the way through, we're just breaking through that top layer to make it easier for the awl to go the rest of the way through. For measuring your project, since we're just doing this little sample piece, usually go around 5 times. Depending on the thickness of your leather and your project, you might want more or less. I just hate running out of thread. We're going to punch the holes the rest of the way as we stitch. So we're going to punch this first one, just clean through, pick up our needles. We're going to go in the back side and pull this all the way through. We're going to make sure that our thread, our first stitch is halfway down the needle, so just matching up the lengths. And in the instructions that we've got, it shows you how to hold your awl in one hand and your needle in the other, so that you can punch your holes as you go. So feels a little clumsy at first, but once you get going, it feels a lot better. So now that we've got this first stitch done, we're gonna go ahead and punch the hole for the second. Then we're gonna follow, I'm gonna flip this over so you can see the other side. And then I'm gonna chase the other needle in. What I think is really important, a good stitch is gonna come out of the bottom of the slanted hole and into the top. So we wanna come out from the bottom and back into the top. Same thing goes for the other side. So as I go in here, pull it through, and then I'm kind of pulling this thread back, making sure that this thread is loose. And with the blue thread, I'm gonna go into the top of this hole on the back side. I'll flip it over in a second so you can see that. And right now, if I were to pull this all the way through, this blue thread would come out at the top of this slot when I actually want it to come out of the bottom. So to keep that from happening, I'm gonna throw the red thread on top of the blue thread. So now you can see the blue thread is gonna be forced to go to the bottom of this slot. So as I pull the red thread tight, you can see because I looped it over, it's forcing the blue thread to come out of the bottom of this stitch hole. So now I'll pull it nice and snug. I'll do that one more time, and we'll do it from the opposite side so you can see how that comes out of the bottom. There we go. All right, so needle comes out, and it's important that this needle, the red thread now, stays on this side of the needle. If we wanted it, if it came on this side, it would actually turn into a knot. So it's on this side. As I pull it through, again, blue thread, I'm pulling it down toward the back and the bottom of the stitch so that the red thread is gonna go on top of the blue thread. And again, on this back side, I'll flip this over. And then as I pull it tight, you can see how now the red thread is laying on top and the blue thread is coming out of the bottom, right? And now if we flip over to the other side, you can see how, again, the red thread is coming out of the bottom and the blue thread's coming out on top. So really important when you're going in to stick to the bottom of the hole. And then on the back side, you're going in the top and then looping it over. Make sure that your stitches are going to be consistent. I'll do one really quick to show you what it looks like if you don't loop the other thread over. Isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's some times when that might come in handy, like on a back stitch. But now I'm going to leave this down and pull this through. And as I pull tight, you can see now this red thread is coming out of the top of this hole, and as I go back in, it's gonna get really kind of wonky. Let's do another one where I don't loop it over so you can see. And as I pull tight, now the thread's coming out of the bottom of this hole. It's a straight line. You see how that is? The blue and the red are almost parallel. We want this nice zigzag line. So I'll undo these and then I'll show the back stitch. To undo a stitch, I just really gently tug that, that thread back out, and I'll do that on both sides. Just really gently picking at it. It's really nice about this thread is that it's poly thread and it's really strong. You can grab a single strand and it usually doesn't rip. So just to make sure I don't catch the thread, I'm gonna pull them apart, and I'm gonna go, just so you guys can see better, I'll pull it out from this side. So I'm gonna go in the top here, so I don't pierce the thread. And as I'm pulling it through, I'm gonna pull this thread back in, just to make sure that my needle doesn't pierce back through that thread again. So, and then I'll pull it through the rest of the way. And now with this one, it's a little easier. I don't have two threads to worry about. push this back in, and I'm essentially just undoing those two flat stitches that I did. So pull that out really gently, do the same on the other side. We'll undo both of those little guys, and then I'll stitch this one backwards, again pulling the thread through to make sure you don't catch on it or rip it. All right, I feel like Bob Ross. Happy threads. Happy little threads. So for back stitching, you want to go in the same way, but you want to go into the bottom underneath both of these stitches. Try to go down nice and low so you're not cutting through that thread. I'm going to make sure it's nice and tight before I do a back stitch. And again, it's really nice to, for the back stitch specifically, is to go ahead and pre-punch those awl holes. Use your awl and just kind of jiggle it around in there to make those holes a little bit wider so that it's a little easier to get, you know, two sets of threads through that one slot. So now I'm going to pull this up a little bit because I want the red thread to come out the very bottom of this stitch. So, and again, I'm going to pull this out just to make sure I haven't caught any blue in there. As I pull it through the rest of the way, it gets a little snug when you're getting that many threads through it. And in this case, since it's a flat stitch, I want to back up a little bit. I actually, since it's a back stitch, I want a flat stitch on this bottom section. So I'm going to bring the red over the blue because I want the red to be in between the blue thread. If it were coming out of the bottom, then there'd be a little gap here. So I want the red thread to loop through. Actually not loop, I want it to be a flat stitch. So as I pull tight, you can see now the red thread is coming out in between these two, right? If it were coming out of the bottom, it would look a little funky. So at any rate, pull that nice and tight. And the back side is the same. There's no difference how you normally stitch backwards. I'll show you that side here in a second. So again, go down at the bottom. Pull the rest of the way through. Try not to break a needle. All right, and again, you're gonna pull up. And on the back side, you want your other thread to stay on the bottom again. No change in that process. Pull this through. Oh, here. I don't know if you can see it, but I did catch a little bit of the thread. So by pulling this back, right there, instead of just ripping it and tearing that little poly strand, I'm gonna back this thread out, and now it's off the needle. So we didn't like damage the structure of the thread. So, and again, this is actually gonna go underneath this time, pulling through the rest of the way, and nice and snug. And now you can see how this is coming from here. It's staying parallel with this one, and this red thread is, just by doing that under loop, it just stays nice and close. And I'll show you guys what the last one looks like from the other side. All right, so again, same setup. I'm coming out of the bottom of the hole on this side, and I went in on the bottom of the hole on that side, pull it through the rest of the way, try not to break the needle. And again, this blue thread, we want to keep it on this side, and the new thread that's coming in is going to go on this side. So important that this comes out towards you and the new thread goes out on the other side. So I'll pull this up like we were doing in the last one to make sure that it's going in the bottom. Try not to catch the thread on the other side, pull it out. Instead of looping over, we're kind of looping under, and then pull this through the rest of the way. Nice and parallel, nice and straight. And now you can see on both sides here, we've got nice parallel stitches that are coming out. Pull it pretty snug. And now we'll cut these ends off and burn them down. That's a back stitch. I'm gonna use our little thread cutters here to cut right, like maybe just like a millimeter off, and then point it nice and straight up. And just use the very tip of the lighter, try to keep the heat away from the leather, and melt it down. And then I'll take a piece of scrap leather and press it down. And I'm gonna have to do it a couple times. You definitely don't wanna put a burn mark on your thread, on your project, excuse me. All right, so we've finished stitching this project all the way around. The last step is to take a nice soft polymol and hammer these stitches down flat. Since we used a stitching groover, this effect won't be as drastic as it would be if we used like a wing divider and had the stitches lay on top of the thread, on top of the leather. So in this case, we'll do this, but it might not have as much of